What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Dynasty Underdog. Billy Beeman here. No Uriah Dawkins, but I do have Jake Kornblum with me, replacing Uriah. Just want to give a shout out to Uriah and his family, just giving him some well wishes. Yeah, hopefully he's back next week. So we have a pretty fun show sheet tonight. We're going to be talking about a couple prospects, Jack Bech, Ricky White, and a bunch of other fun topics, some stuff from the Discord, some other stuff from Twitter. But before we get going, how you doing, Jake?
You don't care. You don't really care about how I'm doing. Bye. I'm doing well. Yeah, it's been a wild week, and just kind of glad we're at the end of it. Have an exciting weekend coming up. I think we're about to get hit by a weird, almost semi hailstorm, and then it's supposed to be 75 on Monday. So honestly, what is life? How are you doing, though? That's more important.
I'm great. No hail down here in Florida, fortunately. It's getting much hotter, but I will be actually traveling out to Atlanta next week for work, but I will be here for the pod on Tuesday, so we should be good. But yeah, just busy. Both of us, all of us busy, got a lot going on, but excited to be here as always. So let's hop into it. Let's jump on right into it. News and nonsense. So more nonsense, not really any news to go through here, but I did find some interesting stuff as I was scrolling through the socials. And I thought this was a fun one to kind of stop on because I found myself kind of questioning where I landed on this really. And so I kind of wanted to bring this to the pod, bring this to Jake and just kind of discuss it. And so I call this the McConkey Conundrum. So if we hop over to the old Twitter box, we have a couple of a couple of popular people in the fantasy community chopping it up about Ladd McConkey. So I thought it was an interesting conversation. Snoogs, Fantasy HQ hops in here. If you can sell Ladd McConkey for the 102 to the 103 in rookie drafts, do it and laugh to the bank. Paul Patterson, friend of the show, hops in. Counterpoint, don't do this. And I thought this was interesting. And then, Jagger May, another friend of the show, and I saw him actually post about this a couple weeks ago, but he's like, I got flamed weeks ago for buying Ladd for a top 3 pick. Analytically, and even from certain film standpoints, virtually little difference between him and Garrett Wilson, except he has Herbert. I don't know why he isn't a buy for any first round rookie pick. I'm just going to throw it to you, Jake. What do you think about this?
It's a really interesting argument. I do think that we're probably in the mindset of Ladd's value in context of the actual rookies that are kind of present in this upcoming rookie draft. I don't think that we would be saying this if we had a true QB1 that I think folks were a bit more excited about, or even a QB2 or a QB3. You know what I mean? It is so shallow that we are differentiating the value of upcoming rookie picks because of that, which I don't think is necessarily the wrong thing to do. You have to use that context in mind. I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with using the 102 or 103 to acquire Ladd McConkey as well. I think at the end of the day, it really just comes down to realistically where your build is at. I do think a prospect and a profile like Ladd ends up slotting in, hopefully, into your wide receiver 1 or 2, depending on how your team is built. And if you're in a league where all you really need to do is start somewhere between 2 to 3 wide receivers, I would want to get into someone like Ladd to kind of fill out the rest of that team. I do think that he's probably in a good situation, as well as just the profile itself. We were pretty high on him. I think the landing spot was really great. The DC wasn't awesome, but I think the landing spot oversaw that, and which is why for both you and I and Uriah as well, we all had him kind of sitting there towards the end of the first, hovering around, the Brian Thomas Jr.'s and Jonathan Brooks values. I was probably the one that had him over Jonathan Brooks, but I think that's not important. What's really important, though, more so is seeing where he landed, seeing how year 1 played itself out, and seeing how he was able to basically conquer that wide receiver room, which you could say whatever you want about it. You could say whatever you want about it.
Not a tough conquer. It's
yeah, but the same team with a different coaching staff did happen to use a first round pick the year prior on another wide receiver, and he made sure to clear his role from him. They could have easily kept on to Keenan Allen. they, went the direction that they did. All of that to say, I do think that Lad has kind of cemented himself into a pretty good space. We're already seeing him sit at the end of the second round of a startup, start of a third round in startups. So yeah, I don't see anything wrong with this thought process from Paul and Jagger. I also don't necessarily see anything wrong with it from Snowden. Is all I'm going to say.
Yeah, and I'm glad you added that little bit to the end there, because I think his value sits market wise at like 104. I think that's pretty appropriate, right? And so like saying like trade any rookie pick for him is just like it's something I just can't really do, I feel like, because I know for a fact that I could get Lad plus for my 101 if I had it, right? And so like I'm not going to make that trade just from a market standpoint, knowing what it is. But then just like pull back, let's just go from like a player standpoint or a prospect standpoint. I'm just like, as much as we liked him, right? Did we ever, and do we, even seeing what he did in year one, think that he is like Cooper Cup upside on a week-to-week basis? Because that's what I've seen people kind of propose, and I'm just not sure that's the player he is. Granted, he is a very quality player, very good player. Despite what he can do after the catch, I do think he's a little limited there, in comparison to kind of elite players within the same, range that you're talking about now. We're talking about, early 25, 26 first, like you said, end of the second round. I think it's just a little pricey for me. And kind of what we're purporting him as is kind of just like, I think you're putting the cart before the horse a little bit here. Adding talent to this wide receiver core may help him, to be honest. So I don't want to be like, they may add and it may hurt his volume or it may hurt his productivity. I don't know if that's the case. All I'm going to say is they're probably going to add to this room more. I don't know how that'll impact him, but yeah, like I kind of agree with you here. Like using your mid first round picks and early first round picks in this draft as a contender, I feel like you'd have to be a contender to really do this kind of thing, because I mean, maybe Lad does possess more value long term than Shedeur, right, at 103. And I guess you're like, well, he's already a solid player, so I don't want to take the risk on Tet. You know what I mean? But I think you also run the risk of like Travis Hunter getting picked 4 to the Patriots, and they're like, we're going to use this guy's wide receiver, and you're like, well, I would have picked Tim at 103, and that would have been a pretty crazy, scoop up there for, Lad, who is a late first. And I don't know. So like, I'm not trying to hold on to the prior costs and everything, but I think that there's more of a conversation here than either of these parties are kind of letting on. You know what I mean? And I think they're all kind of right in a way. But I think it's worth the conversation. And seeing Lad this high, value this high does make me want to shop any shares I do have around, not necessarily to go take the 103, but to go get some crazy package, right? Because it just seems like that's where the value is kind of heading. And so that's where my mind goes with all this. Sorry to keep on deliberating this.
No. I think, to your point, I think we see this very much eye to eye. This does feel very roster constraint and build constraint. So like for me, and I guess this is part of, like, we didn't talk about the actual thread that went along. I saw that. We didn't talk about the thread that actually went along, but Paul, does talk about how he doesn't see Lad's value being capped at wide receiver 10, basically. And I think, to your point, there's too much of an unknown situation with regards to the wide receiver room in Los Angeles. But also the one thing that I will say, to your point, and to probably just the general wide receiver landscape, is that I just don't know if there's necessarily a space for Lad to continue to move up into. Like,
right. Thank you. Yeah, that's
like
where
we're very much in this mindset that he can only continue to grow. But I do think that realistically, to your point, last year was probably the least competitive wide receiver room that he could probably get into. There's going to be probably a space where maybe there's a Tyler Warren or a Colston Loveland, maybe even coming in this upcoming year. I wouldn't be surprised if Will Dissly is not the tight end 1 in 2025, right? So it's like, I don't know. There's a space where you need to understand that there's going to be other circumstances that can easily impact him. And if he's at a ceiling value, I don't see why you wouldn't want to cash in on something else, especially if you can do either like a tier down into a player that you might think that has a higher ceiling and get additional value added on top of that. But by all means, I understand the love for Lad. I just think it's maybe gotten to a bit of an extreme.
Yeah, I mean, I really want to have Paul on here to kind of chop it up about this one. I think it's interesting. I wonder, and I don't mean this as a shot. It probably sounds like I'm being a dick, but I wonder if at some level, like you're looking at the numbers, right? And that's about it. And you're like, yeah, absolutely, he has room to grow. Rookie season, this is what he did. And it's like, I wonder if you kind of put it all together and like, and kind of see what he is and how he plays realistically. And like, it's like, can he really improve from here? Is he that explosive of a player? Because that's what it would need to be. He would basically need to improve his, not improve, but like maintain and improve explosiveness to become like this really dynamic player after the catch. I think all the other stuff is there, and he's a good player, but it strikes me more as like a possession, high volume guy that can kind of be impacted by a number of different factors as time goes on. So I guess I'm in the universe they're in, but they're hovering far above me. I'm a little more grounded. The gravity has impacted me a little bit more, but it's a fun conversation, and I'll definitely reach. I want to have Jagger on here. I've reached out to him, and I always want to have Paul on here. We definitely should have some of these conversations together, but I always think it's interesting. So no shade to anybody. I know that can happen when we talk about the shit, but we're just talking about it and giving our real thoughts. So that's all. Okay, cool. Moving on. I saw this pop up in the Discord, and I do want to mention, sorry that I have been a little absent in the Discord. I was away this weekend and had Monday off, and then work just like kicked my ass all week because of that. I paid for it. But I did see what was going on, and I made some notes. So we're going to hop into one of the Discord questions that popped in there. But before that, I did mean to pop this up, and it deserves some love in the YouTube comments from Jay. How many fourths for Jake to shave that mustache? Absolutely fantastic comment. Now, Jake, how many fourths?
I want the whole fourth round. Yeah, I need
12 fourth round picks. That sounds about right. Honestly, you know what? If we can set him up with 12 fourth round picks, I think he needs to shave that mustache. That'd be a pretty good feat. Amazing. Good stuff. Love it. People join the YouTube and hop in the YouTube comments. It's always fun, man. Appreciate you guys. Okay. Discord question. You guys got any favorite targets in rounds 12 to 17 in startups? We did do a startup review of DU5 a couple weeks back. And so I would encourage anybody to go listen to that, because we did talk about quite a few, like, you know, players in that range, some sleepers, whatnot. But I did jot a few down myself that I thought were some of my favorite targets from that area, and still undervalued, if you ask me. And Jake, you know, feel free to disagree or throw some in here. But I'm just gonna run through the list I have here real quick. But Chigakonko, Brenton Strange, both I think still relatively undervalued, or just good values in that range that they're in the startup. Hollywood Brown is down there, I think, in like the 15-16 range, which is still good value. Ray Davis, I think, is still a good one. He's kind of later than all of these guys, and I see no reason to fade that profile. I think he's a solid pick. Calvin Ridley is like on the precipice of like that 12-13 area, but yeah, right. But still, I think that's honestly, I think it's a great pick. Like, yeah, he's a little older, but we do this all the time in Dynasty. I think he has quite a bit left in him, you know, with that absence from the NFL, and he is the guy there, despite what they add, really. So, I like his value. Stephon Diggs, granted, he's going to be injured, probably not injured, but recovering from injury for the first, you know, quarter of the season, maybe half of the season. But that's why he is a value, and that's why he's down in this range. And I think for, you know, if you're building out kind of a contender build, he's going to be a guy you want to attack in that, you know, 12 to 17 range. He's just, I think he's a great value just based on kind of his performance last year. And I'm not too concerned about these receivers these days coming off of those ACLs. And then finally for me, just the rookie picks in there. Like, if nothing else, just go ahead and stock up on the rookie picks. There's some really solid picks in that range. I think early thirds, maybe late seconds, but definitely like some early thirds in there. And I think if you're not getting some of the guys I mentioned, then you should probably just be attacking the picks. But any thoughts from you, Jake?
Yeah, I definitely like the group itself. I would say the only one that I'm probably off of is Ray Davis. I think Ray fits into that offense as long as James Cook isn't there. And I just don't really see James Cook. Like, I know that
he's good insurance. That's how I think of it. He's good insurance in the like 17th, I think, is where he's at, kind of like.
Yeah, I just think that in that same-ish range, there's, I think, it really depends on also scoring format by all means. Like I think that's super important.
Sure.
Roster construction, because like Hunter Henry is in that same exact range. I'd much rather Hunter Henry over Ray Davis.
Same.
Specifically,
Yeah.
if you're playing in a league with anywhere between probably 0.75 to 1 TEP or tight end premium. I don't know why I always call it TEP. Is really I know
It
it
sounds
bugs
like
you.
you know what it sounds like? It sounds like a terrible frat. It's
Yeah,
like
it does, because it is.
it's
I
like
think it is a
you go to TEP.
terrible friend.
Oh, is it? Is it?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah,
Is
I
it
think
teak? Is that it? Oh my god. Or
yeah.
whatever it is. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That exists. That existed. I'm
I
sure
think
it
I had a
still
lot of
exists.
friends in that frat.
Yeah, yeah. Shout out Andrew. Anyway,
Oh
I
god.
did like most of that list. The only person that I would add probably on top, I think he's somewhere in the middle of that range, is Russell Wilson. I do think that Russell
That's a
Wilson
great
in the
pick
right
there.
landing spot this upcoming year, and for the insurance purposes, like I would be more than happy to take that risk. Like
Yeah.
I could get into a quarterback who realistically will probably sit at QB 12 to 15 at points per game. And I would be pretty happy with that. If he lands in the Giants, I think that that's actually a really great spot for him, and probably helps out a lot of that team, and just something to be mindful of. One person in the comment, shout out to Big Boy. He has Rachaad White. I think that's actually a really good shout too. I actually listened
Oh yeah.
to
Yeah.
I actually listened to Scott Connor's running back efficiency podcast because of Big Boy this past week. And it was a really cool listen to just talk through specifically receiving running backs and kind of how much of a bigger boost they get to their game. We know that Rashad lost a bit of his role towards the end of the year, but he was still incredibly efficient on his actual touches. And receiving backs in general are just going to have a much bigger impact on the game itself, especially when you're playing in a league at full PPR. I think it's something to be mindful of. And Rachaad White is someone who's just being dogged heavily in ADP. So shout out to Rachaad White.
No, it's a great one. And I think, because of how inefficient he is as a runner, we forget how proficient he is as a passer and how valuable that is to NFL teams league wide. And so whether it's the current situation he's in where he will have a role or it's somewhere else, I think he will probably carve out a role within that passing game. And I forget the figure exactly. And maybe you remember it's like isn't it like 1.6 or 8 or something times more than a rush attempt is worth. It's something like that, right?
I don't remember the exact statistic, but it is very, very
significant,
drastically more impactful. And in that same regard, like guys like like an Austin Eckler, who's only averaging 7 or 8 touches per game, his points per touch, I think, was like close to almost a full point per touch, in comparison to someone like a James Cook, where it is not exciting whatsoever if you were to remove the 18 touchdowns that he had last year. So just something to be mindful of. I think Rachaad White is definitely a really good shout, and I think someone who gets unnecessarily hated on because he isn't a very good running back, but he does the rest of the game well. And it's another reason why guys like Antonio Gibson have lived in the league for as long as they have, and why they continue to be rostered on a lot of our teams. So shout out to that.
Yep, absolutely.
I do like in the comments too, shouted out Tyler Higbee. That's another great late round flyer. I do think
I've never been a Higbee guy, but like I've seen this from I think Uriah, from now Jay, a couple of people in the Discord. Like there's some Higbee love for sure, and I know there's what do you have, like a game at the end of the season or something like that, or he got the contract too or something. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. It's not exciting by any means. I just think that for the upside of what you're getting in comparison to the rest of that group, it's like Tyler Higbee or Jake Browning. I'll take Tyler Higbee,
Sure. Yeah. And I guess this is how it goes. I don't love him, but he's useful, which is, I guess that's the point. And if nothing else, if you can snag him for nothing and then trade him for something, then you've already, made out well. So I dig it. Okay. We'll move on here. I have a quick PSA. We don't have to spend too much time on this, but strategic mental exercises. So definitely something I thought of when listening to the Superflex Super Show. Maybe it was an episode or two ago, but they were kind of going through strategies that they don't really implement. And I thought it was an interesting conversation. And so for me, it's like, you don't have to implement every strategy you think of, but I do think discussing them is super valuable. It's something we obviously do on here a lot, just discussing different ways to approach things. But listening to Tommy and and John just like kind of talk about strategies they don't usually use or want to in the non-point scoring season, it just kind of reminded me of that, like exploring those different approaches, whether or not you apply them, it can unlock new ways to build rosters and to negotiate, like, whatever strategies you're looking at, whether it's team building or it's negotiating trades, all that kind of stuff. I think the key is just to kind of step outside the box, outside your usual self, and consider a different path, even if they aren't your go-to move. So I thought it was an interesting conversation. I just wanted to kind of, I guess, layer something on top of it. But Jake, any thoughts there before we move on?
Yeah, no, I think it's incredibly important to continue to challenge yourself and kind of question whether or not what you're doing is the most efficient or the most beneficial. One of my favorite things to do is really look at the other teams that are succeeding in leagues that I'm in and just trying to better understand what they're doing. Ideally, you're hopefully tracking some of that throughout the year, but I think that post-season process should always be like, what got this team to where it needed to be? And so much of what I like to try and do, and also try and, question out of both yourself and Uriah and our listeners, is like trying to properly define what your own strategy or even pathway is. Like, it doesn't even need to necessarily be a strategy, but like have a good understanding of like where you want to get your roster and get it into like another space, right? So that's kind of where I am at mentally, is just like making sure that the mental exercise itself is just about how can I improve upon what I'm doing, knowing that if I stay stagnant, someone else is already going to know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like, there's other people in your leagues that are paying attention to what you're doing. So make sure that you can kind of make small caveat changes year in and year out.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely stay water, kind of try to, keep people guessing for sure without, altering key components of your strategy for sure. But in this same line of thinking, I find myself often just kind of like considering different ways to go about, changing your roster, building your roster. And I do think that those are like healthy exercises. Like, even if you don't go about making those moves or taking action on them, like thinking through, like, what if I broke this team down now? Like, you know what I mean? Is this really going to, okay, now what if I went this way with it? And it's like having those conversations, even popping it into the Discord and asking like, yo, is this the right way to think about this? Or am I like off? It's like those things are going to help you out immensely. And it's just something that we probably do subconsciously a lot. But I think if you're a little bit more purposeful about it, it'll have more of an impact, because you'll be thinking about it and you'll be thinking about how the after effects are kind of impacting you. So yeah, just, I guess, be more purposeful about, like, when you're looking at your team, just consider maybe all the alternatives and like how you could approach these team building, pathways, whether it's in the draft or whatever. And I think it does like unlock a lot of like what you could do. And also it keeps you able to adjust quickly because you've thought of different scenarios. So I'll leave it at that. Comments are popping off right now. AJ, this is true. The perfect time of year for some self-scouting. Absolutely. And that's definitely why I'm thinking of it. Just going back to the conversation we were having before, Evan Ingram goes round 15, 16. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. And I think Jay kind of alluded to that. Ingram went new team, new scheme. I definitely think that he is going to rise up from that ADP. But yeah, definitely a payoff if you can get him that late. I agree. Definitely a good one in those later rounds if he's still sitting there for you. So good shout. Okay, let's keep it moving. Let's keep it moving. Gauging momentum. We have momentum, and we are going to ride the wave. We're going to now gauge some momentum. Jake, you want to take us on this ride?
Yeah, this came up as almost like we can call it a sequel to the Tommy Blair question that we found a few weeks back, which I honestly think started a very good conversation that almost came off the cusp, right? Like, we didn't really know where we were going to take that conversation. And I think it brought us to, both of us, 2 or 3 different definitions of momentum. In the chat over the last few days, we've had a member discuss kind of the different moves that they've been going through, and then kind of accumulated all of them together. Shout out DTs, and really kind of summarized all of the moves that he's done to an orphan from start to finish. And I don't necessarily want to talk about the work that he did with that orphan itself, but like one of the major questions that I wanted to ask him was like, now that you've gotten this orphan in like a really great state, what's the next step, right? Like, do you just continue to ride that momentum of, refining the work that you've been doing, or do you almost kind of let the momentum plateau for a little bit so that you can get to a better place, maybe without everyone knowing that you're now making all of these moves, right? Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
this ideology or even psychology
Mm.
that's going to probably precipitate through the leak. Everyone's going to know that this stream of water is now moving through its way. There's this new snake that's literally stealing assets off of everybody, and he's gotten a lot of great value for the moves that he's done. So my question to you is, how do we know when to let momentum swing naturally with the gravitational forces behind it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I do think like ideally you want it to be swinging naturally. Otherwise, people are going to catch on and try to impact that momentum some way or another, right? And that's what you want to kind of avoid. So the identification of like when to kind of let it go is obviously super challenging, but like I don't know if there's like I couldn't say like after 5 trades, quick trades, like you should stop. Like that's not really it. But it's hard. I think if it's all in a tight window, you probably do want to, after you've gotten the most impactful trades done that you could possibly get, right? Like you're gonna want to be like, all right, let me take a step back and not try to force anything from here. Like if those conversations were coming up naturally, like sometimes for me, I'll make a trade and then all of a sudden it'll just kind of like naturally the momentum will kick in, and now there's like 2 or 3 conversations happening. Those trades start to get done, and I think once that, maybe that's what it is like you have to kind of identify when the league is slowing down, and where you're going to have to force the momentum forward, right? So you have to kind of gauge like when the rest of the group is no longer interested in kind of negotiating with you. I think if you have a couple people going and it's like I think the league generally feels like it's natural, but if you kick off 3 trades and then you start going to other people who haven't really been in on these trades and you're like trying, now you have half or more than half the league is like aware of like, whoa, there's a lot going on here. This guy's trying to get stuff done. And now they notice you a lot more, right? And I think it's more you don't want people to notice you as much, less than you want this momentum to just stop and nobody to notice the momentum. I think the momentum's fine. It's more you don't want to be the force behind it, or at least a recognizable force behind it, right? And so I think you're going to have to try to gauge based off of the kind of league experience that's going on within these micro windows of like multiple trades happening at once.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you honestly hit the nail on the head when you talked about the perception of the league mates themselves. And I think you can start to gauge this through the actual, for lack of better words, engagement process. When you start to literally send out trades or have conversations with your league mates, and the prices for players is now starting to kind of range in a place where you don't even think that the conversations are worthy, this might be a good spot to maybe renege on those conversations and kind of move into a different space so that you can kind of move away from the velocity that was probably taking you where you were, and just making sure that folks don't really necessarily pay attention to the total mass, and we'll consider the mass being the total number of trades that are occurring versus the velocity being of when those trades actually occur. So everything happens within 2 weeks, a lot of velocity. Whereas there are going to be teams like we've even seen it. We've talked about it with our buddy Lapasaurus. He's had in certain leagues upwards of 20 plus trades, typically not happening in small windows. Those are happening across the entire league season. I do think that is a really great way to maneuver through this. So like the momentum itself really is, to your point, this like steady and slow process that you want to get to. But if you notice that there are windows, and I know a lot of people are right now talking about this across different podcasts and just in the community, but this is kind of that dead window, right? We're like just leading in and leaning in to prospect profiling. I know we've been at it for almost over a month now, maybe even like 6 or 7 weeks. But like for a lot of folks, that this isn't, an extreme hobby of theirs where they really want to start watching rookie video or tape. They are at this point, diving in now for the first time. They're listening to other people's perspectives. They want to start watching themselves, right? this is a great time to start really taking advantage of some of the rookie hype that's going to occur, or maybe even the antithesis, the rookie almost slander, right? Like there's a lot of
the
folks
slander,
out there that aren't providing a lot of positive commentary towards a lot of the rookie prospects. So there's definitely different ways to get into it. And so there's ways to kind of instigate the momentum when you want to. And funny enough, I do think that there are a few different trades that we'll talk about in the trade section that actually came from a lot of our listeners. Shout out to them. About the ways that they've already started to impact momentum. So I think that's a really great spot for us to stop, unless you have any other comments that you wanted to bring up. But like, I want to show what that practice looks like and how folks are kind of engaging this early portion or middle portion, I guess, of the off season, and how they're kind of bringing in momentum. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but thanks for talking through that with me.
No, I love this one. I think that the only thing I wanted to comment on was the idea that like when you start noticing your league mates, the prices are increasing. That is a great indicator of you're doing too much. Step back, maybe go a different path, get the scent off you, and then start over again in a couple weeks or whatever it is, a month maybe. You have time. It's not point scoring season, so like if you're getting stuff done, like I got stuff done early, like a couple weeks back, and I haven't so much lately. And some of it was being busy, admittedly, but some of it also was part of this. It was like, hold on, I made a lot of waves. Like, let me take a step back, because I was getting in. This happened subconsciously, 100%. I was not doing it on purpose necessarily, but I will be thinking about this going forward. But I was getting certain offers from certain people after these were done that didn't quite make sense, and I was like, all right, maybe I've done too, it's like, maybe I've done too much. I just need to stop talking to these people a little bit. And like, I'll look at other leagues and stuff. And it was more just like a natural thing, but it's interesting that you say it, because it really hits home for me. And I think that's a huge part of this conversation. So I'm glad you mentioned that. It's a really cool piece of this. So gauging momentum, super important. We will continue to talk about it, I'm sure, in this episode and in the off season. For now, we will move on. We're going to hit cult mentality. Another one I caught on the Twitter box at @DuBois_2020 or _22. Kevin, really good follow, good guy. Known him for a while. Appreciate his content. He's always kind of pushing positivity out there, so that's always good on the Twitter box, because that's not really what you get there. But this one was an interesting proposition, I think, that he had here, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. My new dynasty take. He says, my new dynasty take is that there is no such thing as buy and sell windows anymore. Managers are too smart. I think there's something to this, but I still find some windows. So I'm wondering what you think, Jake. Do you think this is a true statement, or somewhere in between, or totally false? What do you think?
Yeah, I think with statements like this, and I mean this with no ill will to Kevin, is that it's too blanketed, obviously. And I think it is super league dependent. There are going to be leagues, I'm in them, where there are definitely market inequalities that exist, right? And I think to a lot of, I think the fragmented reality of the conversations we were just having before about Ladd McConkey, I think the valuation of Ladd McConkey is a perfect example of where there are going to be ways for you to get out or into Ladd McConkey, depending on the different micro environments or micro markets that you're playing in. And I don't think that's because people are too smart or not. I just think that the valuations of certain types of profiles tend to kind of tier themselves up to a place that they don't need to be any longer, right? And that's kind of where I see it, to be completely honest. I don't necessarily believe that that isn't the case either, especially for folks who've been playing Dynasty for, 10 plus years. I'm sure the landscape has changed drastically. I'm sure that there was a huge margin and edge to be gained for a large part of the community with just different tools that they were using that others weren't. But now that it's become more commonplace and we all kind of use the same, 5 to 7 tools, and we understand which metrics, end up.
We use all each other's data and we listen to all each other's podcasts.
Literally, right? Like at the end of the day, that's really
I see
what
you.
it is.
I know what you're doing.
And the worst part is that so many of us are pretty transparent about what we're doing, right? So,
Yeah.
and I don't mean that in a negative way. I think that's how it should be. It really is this like beautiful melting pot of strategy, as well as data analytics, as well as prospect profiling. Like, if you took all of the best skills across the entire like league landscape, folks are taking in all of that content pretty regularly. Now, will you find individuals who are way more recreational? Absolutely. But the hobbyists, the people who take this to almost like a point of contention for themselves, like this
Obsession.
is, like this is their sport, right? Like they are play, like they don't
their competition.
Like they are playing fantasy football. Like for those people,
I'm running the routes, Jake. You know that, right? I'm running the routes.
But like actually though, like you're training every day. Like you really are. You're listening to 4 to 6 hours worth of podcasts. You're diving into tape of players. You're going into different spreadsheets that you have, looking at the different numbers, seeing where there's a specific player that might kind of break through. Anything to get that margin, to get that edge over your competition. And it exists by all means, but we're constantly recreating that next step, and someone else is publishing it, and then someone else is consuming it, and then they're spitting it out, and then it keeps going through this cycle. So like, I totally get what Kevin's saying here, because I do think there's a lot of fact behind it, but I do think that there's always going to be margins where you might know or see something that everyone might not. And I'm not saying that that's going to be the reality, because sometimes you might misread the situation. But I do think that so much of this really does come down to kind of like that immediate adaptation process. Amazing comment, by the way.
Yeah, Lapisaurus, making trades is my cardio. I love that. And Jake, 4 hours of podcast and hours of tape. You're describing some very sick individuals out there, and I love them. I love them all. I am them. It's amazing. But yes, that is a great comment. Making trades is my cardio. That's got to be put on a shirt, and I will wear it. Good stuff. But okay, so just I guess my thoughts are, I think that to an extent, I think like I think it's true. Like it's kind of like there's no more sleepers in Dynasty, right? It's like everybody knows the sleepers. Like you can, but there was Puka. You know what I mean? So like, there's always the exception of the rule. And I think that this comment strikes me more as like, especially with like, okay, trade, a guy gets traded, a guy signs to a new team, you put him on the trade block, ain't nobody, we talked about this, nobody is going to reach out to you about that guy. The players are too smart from that regard. Like you got to be a little bit, more deceptive, a little bit. You got to put some more thought into this. We talk about this all the time. That's why we talk about, trade negotiations, and not necessarily like trying to trick people, but like I said, being deceptive and hiding your true intentions and those kind of things, because the players are too goddamn smart. So you have to devise new strategies, new ways to approach things to get what you're trying to get, and find those buy and sell windows based on different things. So I think that Kevin is definitely hitting on something, but I think if we take it to, the next level, you find that there's a layer of strategy involved in kind of attacking what he's talking about here and finding your way into those buy and sell windows. It's just harder these days. And that's because we are smarter as a community, and that's a good thing. So, okay, cool. Was there a comment I missed? Okay, I didn't know. Okay, cool. We talked a bunch, and now we're gonna get into the prospect profiles. You stuck around. I know this is what you're here for. This is gonna be a fun one. We got 2 interesting players. I think a little bit lower valued, but definitely getting some buzz. And I guess I was gonna start with the white guy, but I'll start with the other white guy, Ricky White. Well. I'm sorry, I had to get it in there somehow, and that was off the cuff. That was not on purpose. Didn't have that planned. Okay. I'm sorry. Out of UNLV, Ricky White, very interesting player. And I'm going to let Jake start on this one, because I don't want to talk anymore after that joke.
Yeah, please don't. I wish I had like a mute button. Yeah, literally.
Just
yeah. Man. Well, you know what? You got it in. You got it in the private chat as well. earlier this week, and it's only fair for you to also slip it into the show. Anyway,
I'm sorry.
Really do like a lot of what I saw from Ricky White. I do think that he's a very exciting player in terms of just kind of being one of those probably lower down the totem pole prospects that I don't think a lot of people will necessarily love. I think that his tape is probably a little divisive. I do think that he didn't test particularly well at the combine, which will probably piss a lot of people off. And maybe they'll think that that will impact his NFL draft capital. Very well could. But I'll start it off. I watched him play against Fresno State and Boise State. My first comment, honestly, is going to be a negative, which is not typically how I structure this, but it was one of the first things that I noticed. I found him to be, and I don't ever use this term, but he is twitchy to like a fault. Like he is like overly twitchy. And I even state when getting twitchy goes wrong. So when I say that, I mean like Ricky ends up trying to almost like engage his body when in possession of the ball. And I find that he has multiple plays like within his highlight reel of it being successful. But when you actually watch his tape in like a game by game scenario, the dude just turns into tackles left and right. And so one of my biggest issues for him is that he doesn't read the field well because he constantly wants to be making like an old Madden like move where he's just like smashing the juke or spin button and doesn't really know which way to go. And he's like, oh man, I like triple tap circle. Yeah, that feels like Ricky White. He doesn't use it well enough to be manipulating defenders with movement without the ball too. So it's like he has a lot of this work that I enjoyed throughout his route work, but like I didn't find that the same footwork that he uses in possession of the ball was readable in his actual route work. So, you know, those micro movements that we're always talking about that end up causing significant amounts of separation, I didn't really see it as much as I wanted to in the tape. What I will say is that I did find that he anticipates contact very well, though. So because he is so, for a lack of better words, twitchy and constantly trying to like anti-engage contact, I've found that his body honestly is very well absorbing to contact, one. And secondly, like I found that when he is contacted, he knows and can like senses like almost like different ways to get out of certain situations. For lack of better words, he almost reminds me of like Spider-Man when you like see him like slide through like certain like corridors and things that like he shouldn't naturally. He just ends up doing that. He concentrates at a very, very high level throughout the catch. I thought his hands were actually exceptional. Even with over calculations of his movement, I don't think it ends up impacting his way to finish a reception. So sometimes you'll see him actually like engage his feet before he's about to make a reception. And for a lot of receivers, they wouldn't have the ability to finish that catch because he's already moving, and he finds ways to actually finish the catch. More often than not, he's also getting like smashed in the back. I don't know why, but he ends up engaging a lot of like pre-reception contact. That was in, I believe, a Syracuse game I had watched some tape of. I didn't include that in the list because I didn't watch the full game. And I want to say it was against Michigan when he was at Michigan State as a freshman, which was super intriguing to see. He was super young, very, very raw, but I saw a lot of positive things from that. And I won't talk about that too much. I know you hate talking about old tape.
No, I don't hate it.
Last two things I will say is that I noticed that he does still have a lot of body catching. And I think that it just had to do a lot with his catch radius. It didn't seem like it was excessively long. I wish he had a little bit more. I think he's only like 6'1"-ish. So maybe his arms aren't necessarily as long as someone like a Tet that I'm like so used to being able to just kind of like snag balls out of the air. But he does seem to get a little bit too comfortable in open space and separation where he just kind of lets the ball hit him in the stomach.
Yeah.
Sure. Last thing, and this is because I don't want to comp him because I don't like player comps, but I do find him to be almost similar to Jalen Coker in the sense, not of player comp aspect, but in sense of finding the right foundation for him to be excited about, right? So I think the Jalen Coker excitement started. There was some hype pre-draft, but most of the hype happened post-draft when we found him sitting in a wide receiver room that was basically a dead bedroom. I know it's something that I say way too often, but I think that's just kind of the reality of where Jalen Coker hype started from. And then the antithesis to that is there was a lot of hype about Jacob Cowing, including ourselves, unfortunately, when he found himself in San Francisco, it's like, I don't necessarily want to buy into Jacob Cowing anymore because of the fact that he has this uphill climb. I think if we find Ricky White sitting in a really, really desolate wide receiver room, and I know this sounds like pretty commonplace, but I don't know if the draft capital is going to be as concerning. And I would be more than happy to kind of dive in or risk even, somewhere in that like mid to late fourth range for someone like this, because I do think that the draft capital probably won't match up to what I saw on tape, just because of level of competition. Like I said, combine situation, but who knows? I do think there's a lot positive here, that there's maybe a couple of NFL scouts that see something here. He is someone that I would say that, if kind of similar in like a Tank Dell situation, if he ends up pairing up with like a guy like Cam Ward or Shadur or even Jackson Dart, and they like him enough in some of these offseason camps pre-NFL draft, I could very well see him get maybe not overdrafted, but drafted into a team that might have a better path for him to be successful. What do you see in the tape?
It's an interesting take on, I think, the final outcome that may be there, but I do agree that, I totally agree, like how the Jacob Cowing and the Jalen Coker thing work out. It is interesting. Like sometimes even a good situation, if it's a loaded room, you're not gonna get the opportunity. So it's an interesting point. But with Ricky White, I thought it was interesting. You're talking about like he's almost like too twitchy. I saw what you're talking about totally. Like he has this really innate ability. He's very elusive, like really innate ability to, see the field and execute very interesting moves, absorb contact with good bend. And he's like, I would describe what you were describing as slippery, but I do agree sometimes it's like erratic, where he's like, he'll almost seem to make more moves than are needed, but it'll work out. And that may change at the next level, to be honest. Like we've seen that happen where like you get too much happy feet and then you're Kadarius Toney, and you suck. Like it's
exactly,
you know what I mean? And so like you've seen it go the wrong way, but I do see what you're saying there. And I do think that he does exhibit really good, like transition speed from the catch, spins, jukes often, like excellent elusiveness from the tape for sure. There's no doubt about it. And so from an athletic standpoint, there's some really good stuff there. I don't think he's the most like bursty athlete. Despite that, I think he has good speed, like definitely good speed, good yak ability in general. I agree with you about the sure-handedness. I agree. Like he's not like up there attacking the ball midair really, but you don't see him drop much. He's actually pretty decent in contested catch situations, and he's really, really able to contort his body. Like that body control is kind of what it is, where he's able to both, it goes to the transition speed. It also goes to taking those hits where he's just able to kind of, absorb those hits throughout his body and kind of just like, it's almost like a dummy in a car crash, where it's like, you're not, well, he's not so tight. So he just,
I agree.
It just happens. And like, it's interesting. He bounces off a lot of that. So very noticeable stuff from there. Really good awareness all around, not much of a blocker. So, I mean, he gets dinged a little bit there, not much. From a route technique perspective, I wanted to see a little more refinement. For me, I thought at the top of the route, at that like second level release where he's breaking, he almost bends the route, specifically on in and out breaking routes and like, slants, outs, like those kind of things, which, it's not the worst thing. Like when you're running a speed out, you might bend things a little bit. So I'm not like, I didn't crush him in this regard, but it was something that I noticed. He displays really good pacing though through the stem of the route, starts slow, bursts through as he enters the open zone, kind of lulls defenders to sleep. And he does a really good job of creating separation with that. Excellent quickness from the release and when breaking. So he's definitely got that suddenness at the top of the route, good at throttling down, really fast from, selling a deep route, just boom, throttles down and he's back, cut around. I don't think he displays a ton of manipulation movement. I thought that was kind of a really big deficiency in terms of his route technique. Like he's really separating more with like quickness and with those kind of fundamentals. He's not adding like that flair, you know what I mean? Where it's like the shoulder kind of shimmies and stuff like that mid route. You're not seeing a lot of that. And I think that could limit him at the next level a little bit, but overall, I thought he was, more of a Z-type receiver, excels from athletic standpoint, but also displays excellent ball skills and above average route technique. So I definitely see something there, kind of like you're talking about as like a later round guy. Lacks that route nuance and that manipulation movement, but good separation fundamentals, footwork, quick release, all that good stuff. Demonstrates great pacing, like I said, and he shows the good ball skills. So I think he's a pretty well-rounded guy. But again, I want to see more refinement from these guys. I watch the same games as you, Syracuse, Boise State, Fresno State, and on my grading scale, he got a 66 out of 100, which isn't the worst or anything, but he's probably on the lower end than a good bit of these receivers. I have him kind of above the Jalen Noel type, the Jalen Noel type, below obviously like, Matthew Golden's and those kind of guys. But somewhere in between. He's an interesting prospect. So real quick before we move on, and before Jake, if you want to throw any thoughts back at what I said, just looking at Ricky White's numbers here, they're pretty solid, man. Like they're pretty good. Not too much after the catch, even though he displays really good elusiveness. 5.4 after the catch, which is really nothing to write home about. 11.8 ADOT decent, 34.5 out the slot, which is solid, especially for a player like him. I think he can move around the formation a bit, but shows 3.3 yards per team pass attempt. That is excellent. 2.93 yards per route run. Excellent. Contested catch 39.1, pretty low. So maybe he's not in that many situations. The ones and truthfully, you don't see him in that many, but he did convert the ones I saw. So I don't think it's a deficiency in his game. I think it may be saying that he gets open quite a bit. First down per route run, 14.49%, very good. And then his man yards per route run, 2.24, and zone, 3.41. He's crushing zone. He's beating man coverage. So this is a guy who is doing the wide receiver thing. Like, from a numbers perspective, he's doing it, and he's doing it as a wide receiver one. And so I don't know if that all, I don't think that all is quite going to translate, but I think this guy has some potential. So I'm excited about him. I'm excited to see where he lands. And I do think he's going to be kind of, affordable from a rookie value perspective. So it'll be an interesting one.
Yeah, I agree.
From you, Jake?
No. I think, I think you put in a significantly more detail into his route nuance and just his route running in general that I didn't cover. And I think that definitely finalized kind of the full picture that just wasn't being provided, and the criticism that was kind of needed to fill out Ricky White as a prospect. So no, I thought that was really solid.
Yeah. And again, like, I try not to be like, I just try to be fair, obviously. And I do think I am a tough evaluator. Like a lot of these guys end up, like, I feel like they should, like, I feel like a lot of people have higher grades on guys than I do. Like, as a whole, like, I feel like almost like my grades end up being similar. Just it's different. It just ranges all down. All of them get like ranged down a little bit. That's how I feel like I evaluate. Maybe I don't, but I know that Ricky White is like a darling for a guy like Zach Reed, who I respect a ton and I think does great work. So this is an interesting prospect where I know that other people love him, and I'm like, there's some deficiencies I see there. And so I've already talked to Zach about getting him on. I wanted to finish up kind of our profiles as much as possible, then get him on and kind of have these conversations again a little bit, just more of like a discussion. Like, what do you see? What do I see? Where are we, apart? And can we bring this together a little bit? And so I think that'll be really fun to do, but I know that there's some differing opinions on this player. So I'm trying to be fair, and that's where I came out on it. But we can move on from Ricky White, very cool prospect, and we're going to move on to another very fun prospect, Jack Bech. This is the wide receiver out of TCU. I think he's getting probably a bit more mainstream buzz than Ricky White is. I think he's kind of like the Cooper Kupp clone, if you wanted to do it that way. I wish, we all love Cooper. I wish that I could be like, this is Cooper Kupp 2.0. That'd be great. But I don't quite see that. Like, I think I might even like this player maybe a little bit more than Jake. I'm not sure. We'll see. But yeah, let's give it a go, Jake. Why don't you hop in there on Jack Bech?
Sure. So for Jack, I watched him play against Southern Methodist and Kansas. I would say automatically, I just want to cover this from the top. I'm historically pretty down on wide receivers that play similar to Jack.
Wide receivers?
No. No, I would say wide receivers that lack agility. Like, he lacks a lot of agility in his game. He almost reminds me of what I would want a more polished tight end to look like, especially out of this tight end class. Like, and it's not because he's white. It's because of general route running. He just is a little bit more stiff than what I want out of a wide receiver. he reminds me of a guy who's ran so many practice routes that he just feels like he's stuck in that practice. Now, by all means, does he have some slippery movement within his route running? Yeah, he has a lot of nuance that I wasn't expecting, but I just wanted to kind of come off this understanding that my criticism naturally was going to be slightly biased. So I just wanted to say that openly. I think he carries his weight so well. I know I say that a lot about different wide receivers, but the dude is like borderline a wrecking ball when he moves down the field in possession. I think he's heavily physical at the line too, which really helps him specifically gain separation off of the start of a route. So dealing with press is not an issue for him. I just think he's like a very, very structurally strong wide receiver who also, I guess I have it towards the end of my profile, happens to be a very, very good blocker for wide receiver too. I found that he gets leverage very well. I found that he engages specifically on run blocking incredibly well. And he also plays screens really well too. I've noticed that his actual body language within the actual like play on a wide receiver screen to a different wide receiver is always really well read. It looks like he's going to run a route and then just basically posts up directly into a blocking stance, which I think is just really, really solid play. His game intelligence definitely shows through some of those like more refined moments. Exceptional hands. I think he extends actually very well. I found that he was borderline automatic whenever there was a target to him, he found a way to catch it, which I didn't really see across a lot of this wide receiver class. So I guess kudos to him for kind of standing out for me in that regard. I don't think that he's necessarily the best athlete. His top end speed is it's pretty below average. I thought his balance, honestly, not his contact balance, but his like open field balance. So spinning typically off of jukes, he would just kind of lose his own balance without even getting contacted. That was a big concern for me. I found that along the sides of the field, he didn't necessarily maintain balance well either. So just something to be mindful of. But I did think that it kind of was made up with a lot of his like upper body and lower body strength. I did also like the fact that he was constantly engaging in contact. I do find that when players don't necessarily separate super well, they also play scared. I didn't find that with Bech. And so, yeah, I'm turning into you. Jack Bitch. You've never heard of him?
Damn, I'm that bad. Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, I did like a lot of what I see. I can see that he has some pretty clear limitations to just his general game, but I do find that he, like Ricky White, if he fills into a relatively light depth chart at the wide receiver position, I could definitely see him being very usable. My only issue with him is I don't think that he has a particularly high ceiling. So like he's one of these types of prospects that if I got into him for a relatively cheap price, if there's enough juice behind him where I can probably get off of him already for like an early second or a mid second, I'm probably doing it before he quote unquote hits his ceiling. Like I don't really ever care if a prospect like this gets into the first range. And I know that sounds ridiculous. There's been other receivers that kind of engage in play very similar to him. And I'm going to say this guy's name, and he happens to be white, and I'm very conscientious of that. But he does give me a lot of Adam Thielen vibes. And so when he engages in play like that, can I potentially see a higher ceiling for him? Yes. I just don't think that the likelihood of him hitting that is high. And so he's someone that I see, if given the opportunity in his rookie year, is probably also what I'm going to be cashing out of a guy like Jack Bech. Nope. Said it wrong again. Jack Bech. I don't know.
Yeah, you got it the second time. Yeah, no, that's a good breakdown of it. I like that a lot. I have a lot of the same thoughts for sure. I'll go kind of the opposite direction I did last time. I'm going to kind of give the overall, and I'll kind of get into the details a little bit. But I found him as a dynamic post-catch receiver matched with excellent ball skills, outstanding burst and balance after the catch, ultra athletic, triangle numbers, just, size, speed, strength, just all there. Displays above average awareness all over the field, but especially after the catch in traffic. Elusive for his size, good bend and ability to change direction. Lacks some natural smooth lateral movement, but overcomes with good size, speed, and bend. He's like I don't even know what I meant by this one thing, so I'm going to skip it. Exhibits good stem nuance, leans and throttle. He shows those good like leans, throttles, acceleration, pacing, like all kind of the kind of details through the route. I do think he exhibits some of those, but he does lack above average release technique, in my opinion, and ability to beat press and consistently create separation. I think there's some of it there, and I even made a note for myself, like I wanted to go rewatch some of it. But I wasn't getting that from him from what I saw. I do think the footwork is kind of average. I think he's a little duck footed, which could cause some inefficiencies. And I do think from like if you're talking about like a Cooper Kupp perspective, like his running motion is so straightforward and so like it's almost perfect from a running perspective. And also if you remember Cooper Kupp, like I didn't even remember Cooper Kupp from college. When I went back and watched what he did, I was like, holy shit, this guy is electric. Like it was a different level. Like, and that's not what you're seeing from Jack Bech. And I'm using him as a comp because a lot of people want to do that, big white guy, and they want to comp him, but he just doesn't quite have that ability, even though he's damn good after the catch. It's a different ability. It's more based in balance and strength than it is in dynamicism, burst, and speed, even though he does have good speed, in my opinion. But, digging into the profile a little bit here, good pacing mid route and recognition of zone coverages, good feel for when to sit in behind coverages and obey the path of the ball to fall forward with it for extra yards. I thought he did a really good job of that. Falling into open space or extra yards. He seems to lack a release package, like I said, mainly speed releases and single moves with a few unrefined double moves mixed in. I think that's that lack of footwork for me. He does appear to struggle with some press coverage despite size, more impacted by the lack of speed, I think, there to separate from the contact. Even though, again, I think he has good athleticism, but I think in mid route, he just lacks that speed to separate, I guess. But he's physical, in press coverage. Struggles with physical press coverage despite size. And good burst though through from the release through the stem. Speaking specifically there, I was watching him against UCF. I thought he offered some really good manipulation movement in that game, selling like corner sideline routes. Gets DB's hips turned and bursts inside. So you can tell that he's a calculated route runner and he kind of knows what he's doing, which I like. I do like that. Great hands and concentration and catch radius in general. High points the ball, reliable. I think he's borderline exceptional when it comes to ball skills. Great in contested catch situations, contorting midair and high pointing. I really like that from him. I do think he's good post catch. I think he's physical and balanced. He doesn't go down easy, but again, to Jake's point, that lateral agility and quickness isn't there pre-catch or post-catch for me, and that really limits his game, I think. And I agree with you, just great blocking, and I think all-around pretty good awareness in general, like I mentioned, after the catch, and I think he's really good sideline and zone awareness in general. So I like the player, and I guess the one thing I was not saying from his overall notes that I wrote was he's kind of like a yin yang route runner. And I remember what I meant by that, but it's like he shows these flashes of like really great route technique, but then there's like this other side of it where it's like, again, the yin and the yang. It's like you get this really good stuff and then you get this kind of really bad stuff. And I'm like, I don't know. It's not consistent for me. And I mentioned that, when I first went over the overall notes, I think just he's lacking this consistent ability to I think execute from a route technique perspective, to separate, to beat press, but he can do it sometimes too. And so it's kind of this dichotomy where that's where it kind of the profile I think may fall off a little bit. But for me, talking about Rookie White, I give him a 66 out of 100. I have Jack Bech at a 67.5 out of 100. So very close. And that's not surprising to me, kind of going through the profiles. They're very, I think, similar, not similar stylistically, but overall as like potential and like what they carry as skill sets. I think there's like a similar, obviously, because their grades are similar, it's just built differently, right? So that's what I mean. I think overall they come out to like a similar skill level, but different for different reasons. Really quickly, just talking about Jack Bech's numbers. They're okay. Yards after the catch per reception, 5.5. So both these guys not much after the catch, at least by the numbers. 13.3 ADOT, which is to be expected. 26.8% out of the slot. That's fine. Yards per team pass attempt 2.1, yards per out run 2.44, both very good marks. Not quite what we're seeing from Ricky White though. 65% contested catch percent, which is fine. I mean, you don't want to see it too high, but I do think he converts as well. First down per route run 10.64, which it's good. Again, nothing like we were seeing with Ricky White. Man yards, and this is the part where I really love looking. I think this is really descriptive in my opinion, but looking at like the man versus zone yards per out run, man yards per out run 1.81. That's not very good. Zone yards per out run 3.13. That's exceptional. And those combined make up his 2.44 yards per out run. So that does concern me a little bit, especially matched with kind of what I, described from a route technique perspective. I don't love seeing that compared to a guy who we were just talking about in like Ricky White, who excelled kind of in both regards. Average dominator 12.10. That's not great either. It's okay. And then he's a late declare. So there's definitely some holes in this guy's profile, both from a analytical perspective and from a film perspective, I think. And so I'm, as much as I have him like a little bit higher or whatever than Ricky White, I might end up liking Ricky White as a profile better, in terms of like ranking these guys out at the end. I could see myself having it, especially when DC and landing spot come into play.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I really do like a lot of what you broke down, and I don't have any counters to most of it. The only thing I did want to say, and this is just this is for our Chinese listeners. It's yin and yang. There's no G at the end.
I've done that many times before. I forgot about that. So not only can I pronounce names, I can't pronounce commonality, just phrases.
I think for Americans. I feel like I hear it all the time. It's like
definitely grew up with everybody saying yin and yang.
Yeah, for sure. That would be one. Two would be Big Boy says it's Jack Bech. In insert Britney voice, which I love.
Yes.
Which is and also hilarious.
Leave Betchy alone, says Gordo. Nobody puts Betchy in a corner. Yes, we could do a lot with this. I like that a lot.
Or also, as Gordo says, the Blanco Bolden.
Yes, some are calling him the Blanco Bolden.
No, that's just him.
That is just you. Yeah. It's so funny. Gordo. New and improved Jake Bobo is Jack Bech. Now, Jay, that is the winner. You win comment of the prospect profiles. The Blanco Bolden was funny because he did mention that in the Discord, and I was like, yeah, like I see it, but like, man, Bolden was just like a completely, like he was like levels above after the catch, and he was just a whole different player. I mean, again, like I think I caught one day as a youngin', and again, I don't know how young I was, but Bolden, I remember watching on NFL Network, they popped up his first game ever, and I'd never known that, and I was like, what the hell? He goes like 11 for 250 or something and 3 touchdowns in his first game ever, and I'm like, what? And you go watch this and you're like, dude, he is a man among boys. He's just like throwing people to the floor, and dominant player, man. I mean, he's an exceptional player. So no,
I remember him at FSU. He was nuts in FSU. Yeah. Like that was like us growing up in Florida, having to like watch him on TV, and it's just like,
oh yeah,
the dude was just so overtly physical to almost a fault. Like it was just so excessive.
He got himself hurt later in his career because of the way he played, for sure. Yeah. No, it was a very fun player to watch. I love when we get some Brandon Bolden talk. I mean, Brandon Bolden.
Oh,
that's a terrible Bolden.
There's a New England bias. Like I've never heard one before.
Yeah, that's how you know, bro. It's locked in. But
show's ending in 5.
Anybody who hasn't caught Anquan Bolden's first game ever, please do yourself a favor and go look that up on YouTube and find it. It is a very, very fun watch, and you will be enlightened. So yeah, glad we got to talk about that. Good stuff on the prospect profiles. We just covered Ricky White out of UNLV and Jack Bech out of TCU. Once again, Jack Bech out of TCU. Leave Bech alone. Oh my God. I'm going to have that in my head all night. Good stuff. We'll have some more prospect profiles next week. We are really running through these, man. We are coming down more to the sleepers and the later drafted guys. So, which is kind of fun. Honestly, that's where you find some of the gems. So I'm excited about that. We'll get into some more running.
Are we touching quarterbacks?
we are going to touch quarterbacks.
Okay.
We're going to do one episode on quarterbacks, and we're going to cover like the top like 5 or whatever. We'll just do a whole episode on that and go through it. But yes, we will do some more wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends over the coming weeks, and we will do a final quarterback episode down the road. So yeah, keep a lookout for that. Okay, good stuff. We are going to move on. Final segment here. We have some trades, a bunch of Dynasty Underdog trades. So let's get right into it, Jake. DU1. You probably didn't see this until you saw the sheet. And probably good for you, for your eyes. DU1, Mark Andrews and Jordan Mason, the new Viking, for 26 first, 26 and 27 seconds. So that's a 26 first, 26 second, 27 second for Mark Andrews and Jordan Mason. Where do you fall on this one?
Just for context, this is 12 teams, start 10, tight end premium of 0.5. I'm sitting on the picks and not even by like, it's a lot. Like I think I love Mark Andrews. It's just not the right format for me to want to spend that much to get into Mark Andrews. And I sure as fuck am not going to be paying up for the hope that Aaron Jones gets injured. Like this is a very hopium trade. It very well could work out. I just don't like the process of paying up for these types of assets myself. Where do you sit?
Yeah, I mean, what are you spending? A 26 first and second for Andrews, and then a 27 second for Mason. Like that seems like a crazy overpay for where Andrews' value is at. I'm the biggest Andrews truther that you could find, and we adjust around here. Okay, we adjust around these parts. I ain't spending that for Mark Andrews, not even close. Like maybe the 2 seconds for Mark Andrews I'd be comfortable with, but that's about as close as you're getting on that one for me. So yeah, I'm on the pick side as well. And the first 3 trades we're going to talk about are all the same format, that 12 team, 10 start 10 tight end premium 0.5. So that one, what I will say is I was like, you need to pay for that 26 first. And Ben came in there, a good friend and co-commissioner of one of our favorite leagues, Console Wars. He came in there and he's like, please don't pay for that trade. That is horrible. And I was like, I laughed at it. I was like, it's funny because it's like, yeah, it's kind of harsh, but that is so fucking true. So it's like, yeah, I kind of welcome that in the chat. So, we're honest around here, but I thought that was an interesting one that popped up, and I figured that would be the reaction. Don't go chasing these Jordan Mason profiles and whatnot. Like it's just a terribly poor idea that is going to cost you in the long run. Like Jake said, could work out, but long run, not a good idea. Okay. Moving on. DU2, we have Eric All plus the 3.03 for Chigakonkwo and Juwan Johnson.
This is an interesting one. I think this is a context trade. We have the person acquiring Chig and Juwan is a new orphan takeover manager. And I think that they're kind of like sitting in that weird bubble of like a middling team, but they want to kind of fill out their tight end room. The team selling Chig and Juwan and getting Eric All in the 303 is like, for lack of better words, I love the guy. It's a terribly built team, and he's just really trying to liquidate as much as he possibly can. I don't hate it. Like, I think that this is fine value. He probably loses a little bit. I think that the Chig hype is pretty high right now, and you could probably get a little bit more for that package. But I think where his team is at, he really needs to start taking better shots at higher profile, like higher ceiling profiles. And I think you could probably get into a pretty solid, like, RB 10 or 11 in this upcoming draft, maybe even like tight end 5 if you like the tight end room. There's just so much you could potentially get into that will probably have a higher ceiling than Chig or Juwan, but I get it from both sides. What about you?
Yeah, that's a great breakdown. I agree with you. Like, so I would have basically been patient and forced the split on this and traded Juwan and Chig separately. I would have just made it happen. I would have said that 303, I want it for Chig. That's it. Give me it. And I would go find a random third or a couple fourths or something for Juwan. I've seen Juwan go for a high third. I've seen Chig go for like a second, but in a package, like where somebody got Chig and something for a second. And so I think those are the routes I would have taken and just been a little more patient, especially since you're like rebuilding and there's time to the draft. Like I get wanting to just kind of like move and groove and do your thing. But when you're in the situation Jake described, I think you need to find the highest value routes out of these kind of players, and you have time to do it. And there is, in most of our DU leagues, there is a Johnson truther out there and there's a Chig truther out there. So you just got to kind of do the work and find your way. And I understand that that's easier said than done, but that's my feelings on it. So, okay. But I do think all around, like, it's not the worst. If Eric All if you can get anything for him, I would be trying to flip him for pretty much anything. If you're in the situation he's in, and basically try to do what I was saying, just, doing the extra work on the back end. Okay. DU3, moving on, same settings again. We got Stone Smart. That's his name, right?
That is his name, yeah, Stone.
That's a sick name. It
is.
Stone Smart for the 304. I think this is I would take the pick. But I think no, that's all I'll say. I would take the pick.
Yeah, this was my trade, so I won't put any real context into it, except for this was one of those like auto accept messages that I put out to the league. I added like 5 or 6 different. Yeah, I put out like 5 or 6 profiles that I just put out there for what I thought was like relatively market price for almost all of them. It was like Evan Ingram for a late first, Stone Smart for any third. I think there were a couple of guys in there for like the second range. There was like a Keaton Mitchell for any fourth, that kind of stuff. But Stone Smart was the first one that went, and someone paid up an actual third. So I was pretty excited about that. I thought I was going to get like the 312, which is what I typically will get.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was pretty happy.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's great return for a flyer. So I like it.
That I picked up in December, by the way, from free agency.
Yeah. I mean, please, that's huge. Okay, that's crazy. Yeah, that's the come up. That's what you should be trying to do. That's a great move by you there. Really like that. Okay. DU5. So the scoring settings are a little different here, but 12 team, start 10 still. We are doing point. Let's see. What's gonna matter for this one? Okay, so we're doing 1.75 is the point per reception for the tight end, and I think that's really all that matters technically for this, right?
Yes, I'm cool with that.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So DU5, we have Noah Fant for Juwan Johnson plus a 27 fourth. I'm probably just going to take the side with the pick attached to it because I think both these players are pretty similar and similarly meaningless. If you get anything out of them, great. And Juwan might actually have maybe more to offer on a consistent basis, to be honest, but, given what we've seen from Noah Fant. But yeah, just give me the plus side. I'll take that.
Same. I don't even understand the process of this, like these types of trades. Like you're really talking about like negligible differences. And I know you're only giving up a 27 fourth. Like I get it, but it's just like, this just doesn't feel like it needs to happen. These aren't the profiles that I need to be getting into. So I just don't really recommend going down this type of path. But that's why we all play the game differently. And just like Kevin was asking before, how do we find small edges in this game? It's through other owners liking other players maybe more than market, right? Like this is a great way to just get into the same-ish profile of player, potentially in a better situation. Juwan Johnson is staying in New Orleans with, we already know, a head coach who loves to scheme tight ends. There really isn't that much tight end competition. You could say maybe Foster Moreau, a dead Taysom Hill. I don't know. But like, I think Juwan probably keeps his same role and probably maxes out at like 550, 600 yards this year. And he's completely usable. Noah Fant is a fucking dart throw. You have no idea how he's going to be used. I don't even know if he's going to stay in Seattle. And I don't think he is, right? Like, I'm pretty sure we've all been kind of, the idea is that AJ Barner will probably be their tight end one this upcoming season. So I don't know. It's just like a lot of hope, just like when he left Denver. We all hoped that it would be better and it didn't. And so I don't know. I don't get it. But anyway, let's move.
Oof. Yeah, no, I'm with you. Okay. Let's move on. We got a couple quick listener trades. Jake, do you mind kicking this off? I can literally hear my dog doing something outside the door, and I'm going to just address that, but I will hear you. So just kick this off, and I'll be right back.
Yeah, I'll talk to the wall. That's not a problem. So I just asked the Discord if we had any trades that folks wanted to discuss. First one is from Jay. He provided some additional context. Currently, he has Chuba, so he acquired Dowdle as insurance. He sent away Downs, but now he has the option to slide in a crusty Thielen into that flex spot. So to give the actual trades on paper, we have Dowdle, a 26-second, and the 308 for Josh Downs and the 403. This is a 10-team start 10 Superflex PPR. And because Billy isn't close to a mic, and I just realized that I'm talking to myself, I really do kind of like this work through. I think it makes a lot of sense to get into the second and the third plus Dowdle and getting off of Downs, knowing that your wide receiver room is already at Jamar, Amon-Ra, Puka, and DK. Downs really sitting there at wide receiver 4 and just kind of sitting there for your second flex. I like going running back insurance here and then just kind of cashing in for value. I think getting that second and the 308 is actually really good work. And then additionally, I don't have it listed here, but he also acquired Adam Thielen for the 407, which some might say is, what could that 407 be? It could be anything. It really could, but that Thielen's probably going to get you enough points on a weekly basis to fit into that same flex spot that you got Downs for, or you had Downs for, that I think makes a lot of sense. I'm all in on this. What about you?
Yeah, I agree with you here. I actually think this is a great return because, like we talked about this before, I think Downs is kind of in that, second round territory, like not really approaching a first. And so I think, a second and a third for Downs is pretty appropriate. And then you're getting the insurance for a fourth almost. That's kind of how I'll break it down to, to kind of make myself feel good about it. But I also think any way you break it down, I also think any way you break it down, if you kind of split it up differently, you're going to find like, wow, this works out perfectly. If nothing else, you came out even, but I think, because of the insurance it provides you, it's a really good move for you. So I like that a lot. Good way to use Downs value, in my opinion.
Yeah, same. I'm all for I'm all for making moves like this, and especially because it makes sense for your roster. It gives it even more value to me. And I do love that folks are adding some of this additional context because it really does matter. Like when you remove context from trades, it really is, you're just talking about market valuation. And that isn't really as beneficial because the way it impacts your team is really what's more important. So it's okay to lose quote unquote market value if it's actually improving your team in the right direction. With that being said, we're going to literally talk about context here. We got Big Boy. He's got a 2-parter. It's a 12-team Superflex tiered PPR, tons of bonuses for reception, tons of bonuses for rushing. They're all negligible for me for one another. They all kind of just add on to the same amount of points. So we'll just talk about the tiered PPR. Right. We're at 1 PPR for running back, 1.25 for wide receiver, 1.75 for tight end. First trade is he sends the 101 and the 108 for Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence. Where's your head at there?
Yes.
Yeah, same. This is easy smash for me. I think it just makes a ton of sense. Yeah. Like this builds just to kind of give the roster a little bit of description. Currently looks like after the 2 trades, Justin Herbert, Marshawn Lloyd, Emmanuel Wilson, Christian Kirk, Mike Williams, Tank Dell, JT Sanders, Josh Palmer, Kayshon Boutte, Quentin Johnston, Caleb Williams, and Trevor Lawrence. I don't know if you could tell, but I didn't really list a single decent skill player. So just be mindful of that. On the bench, the really only guy that you'll probably care about is Tyrone Tracy. We do have a Mac Jones in there. We do have a Cooper Rush, a Jake Bobo, really just like flyers galore. But the positive thing that Big Boy had was a shit ton of draft capital. So he had the 101, he had the 108, and he had the 110. So right now he still has the 110, the 201, the 203, the 210, the 301, the 302, the 308, the 310, the 401, the 408, and a bunch of 5th rounders, plus 2 firsts next year and 3 seconds. So I really like this idea of going completely in on your on your QB room. Like you're making it for a fact that your QB room is going to solidify and insulate a lot of the value there. So let's talk about the second trade because we already know the first one is a smash. He trades away Dak Prescott, Brandon Ayuk, Chris Godwin, AJ Barner for Caleb Williams, Tank Dell, Tyrone Tracy in a second.
Okay, that makes more sense. I was wondering which side. He's really, like you said, he is kind of consolidating that value into the quarterback room with Herbert, T-Law, Caleb. And yeah, I mean, that's a lot. Ayuk and Godwin's quite a bit to give up for this, but yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I see what he's doing here. That trade itself, I think, on value, you're probably losing. Like Dak, Ayuk, Godwin, Barner side probably has more value overall. I don't know. I guess Caleb probably makes up quite a bit of the value on there. It's a very interesting trade, but I think given what he's doing and the state of his team, it makes sense to me. Like I understand why he's going this route, and I think it does kind of consolidate the value in a really safe place while also maintaining, some of that, that draft capital he has.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I see it too. It's like, this is the type of trade that I want to make when I don't want to really incur risk. Like, let's be real with ourselves. Brandon Ayuk and Chris Godwin are incredibly risky assets, regardless of what their historical numbers look like, just given the history situation that has just occurred in this past year and the general reality of what the dynasty landscape looks like for wide receivers that are now touching. One is 26 going 27, the other one 28 going 29. Like, as a rebuilder, those guys are almost valueless. Like, I know if he played the long game and the long con, he very well could squeeze out probably somewhere in like the 2.5 to 2.25 firsts range. Sure. But that's a lot of hopium. And instead he cashes that directly into an asset that is, a top 15 startup pick right now. And he gets a second on top of that. He gets Tyrone Tracy, which, depending on what happens post NFL draft, could very well exceed in value again. People might see him as the true RB1 in New York. And if his receiving game ends up increasing at all, maybe he actually has even more value than we even think. I know that's a lot of hopium. I just added to that. The Dak portion of this is definitely the one piece that makes it a little bit more engaging, I think, all in all. But given Dak's window of coming off of injury, I think this is actually really using his value kind of as well as you can without even having to worry about how he performs in 2025. So all in all, given where his roster sits, I'm okay doing this. So he went from basically having no quarterbacks, taking the 101, the 108, and Dak, Ayuk, and Godwin, and turning that into Caleb, Justin Herbert, and Trevor Lawrence. And once again, we're now 2 weeks in a row. Trevor Lawrence's value is just too fucking low. It's just insane. Like maybe even Justin Herbert for the 101. And
the 108. No, but the 101 and the 108 for Herbert is like, that's fine too. Like, what are we doing? You know what I mean? Like I would do that. And so it's like you're getting a free T-Law. Like almost. It's crazy. That's crazy to me. But also this trade in my, like what I was thinking about is like, yeah, like I had said it, like the Dak side probably has more value. It's almost like, I don't know if it's exactly lose a trade now that you're going to win in 6 months, but it's pretty damn close to it. And I think Caleb, his value can increase and probably will increase most likely to a level where you could trade him for a player maybe, closer to a top 12 wide receiver than a top 24 wide receiver. You know what I mean? Like these guys were talking, like not even top 12, but even higher than that. Like there's going to come a point where you can get maybe double X your return on this by just trading Caleb away if you wanted to. You know what I'm saying? By like and getting a much better package in return down the road. So like, yeah, I do think that it's a pretty heady move for both of these trades and for kind of what it does for his team. And this is taking advantage, I think, of values in flux. I've talked about this before. I have a different term for it, but like Dak's value is in flux. Caleb's value is in flux. T-Law's value is in flux. None of those are where their values should be or are going to settle in. And maybe even Herbert you could throw in there, but he's a little more stable, I think, than the other ones. But those other guys, like he's taking advantage of that. And he's actually using Dak probably at the highest value he can within this flux window, and grabbing these other two at maybe their lower points or the lowest points, and kind of he's kind of working somehow in between those two like facts that work against each other in a way, but he used them very well. And so I like those trades a lot, and I like that we're seeing T-Law over and over again be undervalued. It just goes back to kind of what we pointed out, and that is a target I think everybody needs to be after this offseason. So very good stuff there, Big Boy. Very, very good stuff.
And the only thing I did want to add, this was actually the two trades that I wanted to bring up again with regards to gauging momentum, is I think that this is putting you as an owner in the league or as a manager potentially in a kind of volatile situation where you've already extracted so much value from these trades, where it's good to be kind of cognizant of how the rest of the league is kind of gauging your own momentum, if that makes sense. So like maybe you can let us know throughout the next few weeks if you're able to continue making different cascading moves off of this.
Yeah.
If you're able to kind of move some of those additional the draft capital that you have, or if you're going to invest that draft capital into, you know, a lot of running backs this upcoming draft, whatever it might be, it would be really good to know what the future looks like when it happens, just so that we can kind of get an update.
Perspective. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
I would be really helpful.
No, I totally agree. And I think that with this one, you know, how we're talking about it, I wonder if the second trade is actually seen more favorably by the rest of the league, is like he got on this one, even though he got the other one. It like this may not like work in it. It may work in his favor technically, like to temper the momentum and kind of keep it at a more flat place that he can continue to ride over the next couple of weeks. Granted, they're big trades. I think if he got another one done that was like where he got over on somebody, that it might start, you know, people might start be put on notice and may start reaching out and trying to turn the tide, if it makes sense. And so, yeah, definitely, I would love to hear from him over the next couple of weeks on that. Very good stuff. Okay, we got another one here. Gordo 16 team. Ooh, that's a big boy. 16 team Superflex IDP. How am I supposed to do this? Okay, we'll try.
He did say in the comments, he did shout out, you can drop the IDP aspect if you'd like to.
Okay, fair enough. Let's do that then. Evan Ingram and how am I gonna value this guy? I'm not gonna do that to people. I don't know that shit. Okay, Evan Ingram and Parker Washington for Zach Ertz, 215, and the 26 fourth. So that's once again Evan Ingram, Parker Washington for Zach Ertz, 2.15, and the 26 fourth. Yeah, I'll take Ingram.
Same. Yeah, I think this is a really good value to get into Evan Ingram. I'm pretty sure that's the Gordo side as well. This is just like one of those moves. I think it happened right around the time of the free agent signing, so he was almost able to get into him even with the hype. I think this is a timing wise makes a lot of sense. If you can take advantage of this, you know, we alluded to it not necessarily being the easiest, but it almost feels like you were able to buy Evan Ingram at his cheapest with the hope that someone gets the 31st best player. I know it includes IDP, like I'm aware of that, but like, I don't know, it's still yeah, seems...
I got to imagine that those IDP players are similar to the offensive players in that range and are just mid. But I mean, he also got throw it in there. He also got a linebacker back on the Evan Ingram side as well, which is actually kind of crazy to me given this trade. Especially knowing that like around the time of him moving, you know, Evan Ingram moving on from the Jags, like I'm just surprised that this got done. And the 215, like you said, 31st player, the way I think of it, it's a third round pick. You know, that's not a second round pick. Like that's a third round pick. So it's a third and a fourth and Ertz for, I might take Ingram alone for that. And that's a stretch for sure. But like what Parker Washington in Spates, like, okay, like, yeah, that's a great trade for him. So I like that. I like that Ingram side going away pretty easy there.
Okay. Other caveat I did want to add, just last thing, because we've talked about it in the last few weeks, is that Gordo said, the offer was sent by team 2, but I accidentally declined it and then had to resend it. I'm just
and it went through?
And it still went through. So I'm just glad for Gordo's sake that it was still able to go through. We've all made that mistake once and we've all been burned by it. I'm glad you didn't get burned by it, is all I'll say.
Dude, People have much better luck than I do in those situations. Like I even had one. Like I remember I was talking on one of our episodes, and I was like, most of the time you can go back and get that trade done. Like it ain't going nowhere. And like I literally like a week later had one where like somebody pulled out on me, and I'm like, oh, all right, like I guess it does happen. So yeah, you got to be careful for sure. Shit. Okay, we got one more here. Thank you to the Discord again for popping these in there. These are great. Okay, DTs. We got 12 teams, Superflex, 2 PPR for tight ends.
Yes.
Start 10. So 12 team Superflex, 2 PPR for the tight ends, start 10. We have Jordan Love plus the 103 for Caleb plus Mims plus the 108. Okay. Wow, that's a tough one, I feel like, but I think I'm gonna just lean. Oh man. Damn. I'm kind of stuck on this one. I want to lean Love in the pick because I feel like the pick is gonna be, first of all, a better player, more valuable. But Caleb, he could be so much more valuable than Love, and you're getting the pick. Whew, wow, this is a tough one for me. I kind of lean the Love side, but I could definitely be pulled the other way. What do you think, Jake?
Yeah, it's a really tough one. Some additional context that might help. DT's intentionally earned the 101 in this league. So he was sitting basically at the bottom of the standings. He doesn't necessarily want to move off of Caleb. So he's thinking about countering, which is why I have that in the comments. But one of his biggest concerns is naturally how run heavy Green Bay was in 2024. Right. Do we think that kind of continues in 2025? I'll tackle the
and how mid Love was. He wasn't that great last year either, to be quite honest.
He was pretty banged up, I will say. I do think that they rushed him back. I do think that he got injured week 1. Well, we know that. I believe an injury report had like 3 different injuries from that one.
He was banged up. You're right.
Publicized injury. This is a really tough one. I think the prospect of Caleb Williams is a significantly higher quality quarterback than Jordan Love is. I think the gap between the 103 and the 108, it is a lot. I do think that there's probably 1 to 2 players that if they fall to the 103, I would feel differently about this. But the likelihood of them falling to the 103, I just don't think is that high. So, like, if you're stuck and it's Cam Ward at the 103 or Tet, I don't feel that convinced that I need to be doing this type of trade. But if somehow you're looking at either Hampton or Janty sitting there, I would feel very differently, I think. And that's kind of my own biases looking at these types of trades. To be completely honest, the 103 is maybe the hardest draft pick I'm having. A complete understanding of valuation this offseason. And so I sit here wondering, like, what does that look like? Realistically, I would want to stick with the Caleb side. And that's just my natural inclination here. I don't want to necessarily get off of Caleb. Also, we spoke about this just before on the other trade. I do think that there is a world where Caleb's value definitely continues to increase in 2025.
So hard. Yeah.
And I don't have necessarily the same confidence in much of Jordan Love's situation changing. And that's mainly because we haven't seen Green Bay really invest in his wide receivers, just like we saw Green Bay not do for fucking Aaron Rodgers. Like, I'm not saying it's the same organization, but it's the same organization, So I think that they're going to find cheap ways to fill out that wide receiver room. And, at the end of the day, I think I just want to go into the space that I know, and I've seen the investment already being pushed properly to the player that I think already has the higher ceiling. So I'll stick with Caleb here. I do think this is an amazing offer, though. Like, I really do think that this is these are the types of offers that when you get them in your inbox, you're just like, fuck. Like, I need to post this in a Discord server. Like, I need other thoughts, because these are the types of inbox offers that if you snap decision it, you will be very upset with yourself in 24 hours, 48 hours, a week, whatever it might be. Might even be 15 minutes after you snap decision make it. So that's kind of where I sit. Did you have any other thoughts? Sorry, I didn't mean to keep talking.
Yeah. I mean, these are the ones that, like, we talk about this all the time. You gotta reach out to people and get thoughts on these. Like, it's so important, and this is why, like, I think these discussions are great and helpful. But maybe like I think if we added a 26-second onto the Love side, like, would we feel comfortable about it there, or is that not enough to push you?
I don't think so.
Okay,
I think the
so
gap. I
it's
think
a
the
pretty
gap
far
is big
gap.
enough for me. Yeah, I really do. And I would have to be completely giving up on so much of my off-season work for me to give up on that value. Is kind of the way that I would see it.
Sure. Yeah. I guess you do have to try to ride the Caleb wave to gain the value where he's going to properly settle, so you can extract the most. So yeah, I guess this would be technically like selling low, and you have that 108 attached to him, so it's like, yeah.
And the 101.
I wonder if you can counter. Well, but I mean, like, within the trade, you're giving up a 108 and Caleb. You know what I mean?
Sorry,
so it's
I understand.
So like, I'm wondering if you could, like, pull that back and be like, dude, this is Caleb Williams. Like, can't go that far. Maybe I'm giving you a second instead, if you really want to get it done. I kind of agree with you, though. Like, obviously, I'm very torn on this one, but I do think that that's the part that is what's tearing me apart. Is Caleb's value is in my mind, it's going to increase so much in the coming 6 to 12 months that, like, giving up on that now seems like a waste. And so I guess I think I do agree with you there. One thing, though, I want to touch on, and this is both in relation to this, but also just a general conversation real quick before we sign off. And we don't have to sit on it long, but 103, we're completely negating the fact that could be Travis Hunter, right? Like, we're like that. Travis Hunter easily is a top 2 or 3 pick in this draft. He just is. Like, yes, he 100% is, right? Easy, hands down. He is probably the number 2 pick in this draft. If we know he's playing wide receiver, right?
Yes.
So if you're getting him with that, I wonder if that changes the calculation a little bit. Maybe not. Whatever. Just some food for thought there. The other thing I want to mention is, just as an overall like draft thing, Abdul Carter was nothing maybe I'm wrong, in my mind. His name was nowhere until the college playoffs, right? Like, about that time is when his name really popped up. Now he is the best player in the draft. The best player in the NFL draft is Abdul Carter, hands down. Travis Hunter is a generational two-way player. Like, am I out of my mind here? Like, is this not the best player in the draft? Hands down. Like, why is everybody not jumping on Travis Hunter? Like, in the real draft, first of all. Like, I'm complete. Like, just forget about everything else. How is he not the best player in the draft? It drives me crazy. Like, I can't understand it.
Yeah, I think it's because of this, like, weird murkiness of the two-way factor and his general size. He's just like a scrawny dude, and, like, no offense to him, he just really is. And I think, I don't know if you know this or not, but people who watch football, they love big muscle men. And I know they don't want to believe that they love big muscle men, but they love big muscle men. And Travis Hunter doesn't abide by that. Like, he is just a freaky athlete who is just so good at everything he does, like, from literal track and field work to everything that he's doing on the football field. Like, the dude is he just excels. I don't think
190 is, I mean, I get it. It's smaller than your typical 200 plus, but, like, we've seen that succeed plenty.
Oh, we have, for sure. And but so, it's not, so it's not top 3 pick. Like, top 3 pick for people, that doesn't look like that. That's all I'm saying. Like,
but because you typically have better quarterbacks than Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, and better players than Abdul Carter and Will whatever the fuck his name is, Campbell. So it's like,
yeah,
Campbell, right? Yeah, I think, right, at LSU, whatever, the tackle guard guy.
Oh yes, sorry, yeah.
But either way, my point is like, this draft is so light. We all know that, and we have a guy here who is potentially the best cornerback and wide receiver in the class, and you're like, yeah, Abdul Carter, and he won't make it into the top 2. Like, I don't know. Like, the more and more I approach this draft and the more I hear, I'm just like, this guy's going to play wide receiver and he's going to be an absolute stud, and we're going to let him fall into the middle of the first round of a draft, and we're not going to consider him at the top where he should be. And I think there's some oversight happening there personally. That's I guess what I'm getting at here.
I think it's a really good point, and I know you don't want to belabor this. I just have a really difficult time working through the mechanisms of a player who is so openly vocal about wanting to play both sides of the ball and knowing that that's going to have an issue. Like the issue is going to be whoever drafts him, they are going to be making basically that executive decision of what that player wants to do, right? Because the player is openly saying, I want to do both. The team is not going to let him play 100% snaps on both sides of the ball. It's just not
No, but I also don't think
possible.
he's expecting that either. But that's, I mean, it's a fair,
that's not my
factor
point
that you're talking about. Yes.
That's not my point, is that that's the expectation or what. I'm just saying, like, that isn't going to happen. And whatever that balance might be, there's a fear aspect to it, that if it's 25-75, in the 25 is on the offensive side, folks want the fuck out, right? Regardless of how efficient he is on this 25. But the reality is, to your point, he is, in my opinion, the best offensive player in this rookie draft. I personally, like, if I was confident that he was going to be a wide receiver in the NFL, I am taking him over Janty 100%. Like, I think that is a hot take, but like the reality is that I think that he is just.
It's only a hot take because he's a two-way player. It's only a hot
exactly.
Take
but like, to your point, that is why he falls to the mid first. Like, I think the fear sits in the idea of what happens to him. Because you can't control it, right? Like, you can't control whether or not the NFL team ends up playing him the way that you want him to. Like, you can't control whether or not he comes out post-draft and is like, I want to play fucking corner all the damn time. And you're like, oh, shit. Well, there went my 103. It was like drafting Tom Brady in the 12th round, like some weirdo did in one of our leagues the other 1 year.
Maybe my optimism is matching the skepticism in level. You know what I mean? Because, like, I think that there is I think the upside and not even the potential, what is his skill set, is too great to play this game with, both from an NFL perspective, honestly, and from a dynasty perspective. Like, if we're like, I'm going to take a shot on him if he's going to fall in the middle of the first every single time. I don't give a shit. Like, if you know what I mean, unless he gets drafted and they're like, he's a cornerback and we're not playing him at wide receiver, then obviously it changes things. But if I mean, this guy is so dynamic and he's so good. And the whole thing is definitely, like, gone too far, in my opinion.
Agreed.
I just don't know how too far it's gone, like what level that's gone to. But to me, it's just like the fact that he's going to fall to 4 in this draft, potentially in the NFL draft, is outrageous to me. Like, that's insane. Like, so just that's happening because. And, like, we've seen Troy Brown play too, not in the way that this guy's going to play. No.
Yeah.
But I'm saying we've seen guys in recent history play two ways in the NFL and do it well, actually. Troy Brown played exceptional on offense, and he played fucking damn well good on defense. You know what I mean? Like, both, like, it can happen, and he wasn't the best athlete. And now we have a guy who is, and if he falls to the right situation, I think we need to be as interested as if he were just a typical, offensive asset in Dynasty. Maybe not to the level of drafting him over Genty, obviously, unless you're getting, like, this guy's our wide receiver 1 type talk.
Which we're not going to get.
We're not going to get. Right.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, I think he should be considered up in the top 5 picks for sure. And I think we're going to, unless he falls in the draft or some crazy shit happens, I think that's where we're going to need to end up. And that's where I'll probably have him, which may be a little bit hot take in the community. I don't know.
It's fine. I said I would take him at 101 if he was for sure a wide receiver. So it's all good.
But that's not like that. So would everybody else, dude. Like, so would everybody else. They just can't put themselves in that mindset because of, like you're saying, the profile, because it's just the fear. So that's all it is.
It is. One last thing I wanted to say before I wanted to read Big Boy's commentary.
Yes,
if the Giants pass up on Travis Hunter for Shadur Sanders, I no joke, don't think I'm going to watch a Giants game this upcoming season. Like, I am a fan. I know that. And I know a lot of people are going to question fandom and everything. It is just, like, truly, like, you don't know ball decision-making by fucking professional people who are getting paid millions upon millions of dollars to do this shit, that I will literally, like, lose my love for a very bad organization. So anyway, just wanted to say that. Secondly, Big Boy, shout out. He watch back some of our live stream. Just, he wanted to provide some commentary. Basically, He's made over 20 trades in this league in less than 10 months. Awesome. Goals are to trade Tracy for a second. Hope no one else in that league is listening.
Yes.
And he doesn't really have anyone else to trade, as unfortunately, when we were covering your roster, that was abundantly clear. But he will likely try and trade his 25 picks for 26s and drafting running backs and value. Yeah, I think this is an awesome path to basically getting your team as probably middling as possible for 2026. But, you know, like you've kind of alluded to, it's definitely going to be an uphill battle to get into some of those like stacking of firsts to then push those future firsts into other elite players. But I really do love the hubbing, as you will. You've created a hub of quarterbacks.
The hubbing. I like it.
No,
I like it. And
yeah.
No, sorry. I don't mean to cut you out, Jake. Go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good.
No, I mean, the only thing I was going to say is like to the narrowness of his team, like that's why I was alluding to as Caleb's value grows, and if it does grow as expected, he could be one of those pieces that you churn out of into maybe another quarterback plus a really good player. You know what I mean? Like where you're able to now continue to keep that hub of quarterbacks, but also expand the talent on your team that it's currently deficient in, right? Like at some point, you're going to have to find a way to do that. You're not going to all of a sudden just come across 6 or 7 more good players just all of a sudden fall on your team. You're going to have to make moves, right? And they're going to have to come from somewhere. And I think just looking at like Herbert and T-Law and Caleb, like those are all very good assets, I think. And one of them specifically, I think is going to have like an immense community value potentially down the road. And you're going to be able to take advantage of that. And I think you just need to be open to it, even though you just acquired a really good player in Caleb. I think we want to be open to those kind of moves as long as we're getting the proper return, a good solid QB back plus, right? We don't want to do this for just anything. So hopefully whenever that happens, we'll be there to talk you through it and talk through it with you. But I think that's kind of the headspace you need to get in to just at least allow yourself to build this thing out the right way. So, but really good stuff there. I think I agree with Jake. Great path forward. I love it. Awesome. We have gone almost 2 hours. No, listen, we obviously knew that was going to happen with Jake on, or no shock here. Okay. But I really enjoyed this episode. I think we covered a bunch of really fun topics, covered a bunch of Discord stuff and some good prospect profiles. So Jake, thank you so much for being here in place of Uriah this week, even though I'd love to have you both here. I do appreciate you doing that. It's really great. Hopefully we have Uriah back next week. And if not, I will drag Jake here willingly or unwillingly. We'll see what happens.
Next week, probably not. Hopefully, maybe the week after. I'm traveling next week. But yes, it was great being here. Thank you for having me. I hope everything goes right with our other hosts, and we see him soon.
Awesome. All right. Everybody send love your eyes away, thoughts and prayers and all that good stuff. Otherwise, this is Dynasty Underdog. You can catch us on Twitter at Dynasty Underdog or on Blue Sky at Dynasty Underdog and find all of us, under those socials. So thanks for tuning in. Jump in the Discord. Join us live on YouTube next time. We love interacting with y'all. Otherwise, peace out, and we will catch you next time.
Check.
Later.
Bech.